So I just got word that 50 Cent bought more property downtown this week, and I watched KSLA's coverage. They were talking to, I think it was his real estate guy, and they reported that he bought a lot of property on Commerce Street downtown, and they showed some pictures of some of the properties that he purchased, and one of the properties I noticed I actually have an old postcard from like the 1950s where this particular spot, 624 Commerce Street, that was once Ernest, Ernest Orleans restaurant. That's it's near downtown, but it's not exactly downtown now. It's off of Uri, I think, right after the I-20 overpass. Well, back in the day, back in the 50s, when Ernest Palmisano Sr. was running the business, he had he once had his restaurant at 624 Commerce Street, and back then it was known as Ernest's Stable. And this restaurant had a theme, kind of like how sports bars have a theme nowadays, like Hooters and walk-ons, where you have the waitresses dress up like cheerleaders. So this restaurant that Palmisano Sr. had back in the 50s was called Ernest Stable. And he hired young black males to work, well, they had to dress up like farm hands, like farm boys. Okay. And I recently read an article that was published back in 2021 by the 318 Forum, and they were interviewing Palmisano's son. So now Ernest Palmisano's Jr. runs the restaurant. So, Ernest Orleans Restaurant is a long time restaurant. That name is like synonymous with Shreveport. There's a lot of restaurants in and around Shreveport that have been around for a long time that people know about. Ernest, you got Strawn's Eat Shop. Uh, Up my way on the west side of town, right across the street from the water park, there's a Jan's River Restaurant. They've been around a long time. Who else? Partners Barbecue. You got a lot of restaurants in and around Shreveport that have been around for a long time, and they've almost become synonymous with Shreveport. Okay, and Ernest is one of those restaurants. Well, back in the 50s, when Ernest was located at 624 Commerce Street, it was not only was it a restaurant, it was also a private club. It was also called Ernest Stable Private Club. And back in those times, the Shreveport elites were members of this club, Shreveport elites. And that would include like local law enforcement, city and parish politicians, and also several members of the Lions Club. Now, you guys remember last year I posted that video about the Bossier City Lions Club. That's their headquarters is actually located on Bossier High School's campus near the football field. And I explained to you guys in that video how back in the 40s they would have these blackface shows at Bossier High School's auditorium. So you had a lot of bigotry going on back then, back during those days, because this was back in the times of segregation and Jim Crow, and black people at those times that were seen and treated as second class citizens, and sometimes even worse. Okay, and a lot of these Lions Club members were also members of this private club at Ernest Stable. So you can imagine what how these waiters were treated at this restaurant, because I have uncles, I have aunts who were actually alive back in those times. They were kids back then, but they told me stories years ago about how a lot of places in downtown they weren't even allowed to go into. They would hire black people to work at restaurants and hotels as cooks and valet guys, and what do they call the guys that work the hotels? Hoppers or something like that. But yeah, to see, like back in those times, restaurants and hotels, they would hire black people to work there, but they couldn't eat or stay there. They couldn't book rooms there. And at this restaurant, they would hire young black males as waiters, and the customers would often call these waiters boys. Hey boy, come here. Hey boy, where's my food? What's taking my food so long? Boy, give me a cup of coffee. Boy, give me a glass of water.
After breakfast, boy, maybe you'll sing a little song for me.
They accepted being in that subservient role. It was normal back then. Back in those times, black people would often, like downtown, when they were walking down the sidewalk and they would see like a white family or a white couple approaching them, they were to get on the street, walk on the side of the street, and let the white people walk by. And then once they walk by, they can get back on the sidewalk. So black people in those times, they accepted being in a subservient role. They knew they were second class citizens and they had no problem with it. Well, most of them at least. It was normal back then. So these waiters, these young men, these young black male waiters accepted being called boy, and there were even stories of some of these customers coming in and like making these young men humiliate themselves by tap dancing and doing all singing. Hey boy, come here for a minute. I want you to sing for me and my guys. They would do stuff like that for tips. For tips. I'm talking like 5-10 cent tips. These waiters, these private club members, a lot of these guys were members of the Lions Club, and these were members of the law enforcement, the Bossier and Shreveport chapter. And this was like their hangout spot back in the day. And these guys would come in like on a Friday or Saturday night, eat and get drunk, have fun, and they would often call these waiters, these young black male waiters, to come entertain them sometimes while they were eating. And this is not an attempt to smear or tarnish the name of Ernest Restaurant. I've never been to the restaurant myself, but I heard they have good food. And I think the guy who ran for sheriff earlier this year, I can't recall his name at the moment, but he ran against Sheriff Whitehorn, and he had his little campaign watch party at Ernest back in the spring of this year. So Ernest is a well-known, well-respected name, been around Shreveport for a long time, but I just wanted to give you guys a little history lesson about this restaurant and what was going on back in those times. Okay, and I found this article that was posted by the 318 Forum back in 2021. It gives a nice little introduction to Palmisano Jr. and how the restaurant started. But we're going to scroll down to the middle of the article here where it talks about the beginnings of the restaurant. It says here that the story begins at an unexpected place, the intersection of Kings Highway and Uri Drive, where Shreveport's newest Whataburger currently stands. Ernest Palmisano Sr. opened his first Shreveport restaurant. The chef in a squat black building at 519 East Kings Highway in late November of 1947. The restaurant served French, Italian, and Creole cuisine, a distinctly New Orleans blend of offerings. Though he was a new restaurant owner in 1947, Palmisano wasn't new to the world of hospitality. Beginning in 1933, he was frequently praised in local publications as one of Shreveport's top bartenders, a craft that he honed in New Orleans. When he changed jobs, moving from one bar to another, his new employer would take out a newspaper ad to announce his hiring. This suggests that he was a local celebrity even early in his career. One ad goes so far to say, the whole town of Shreveport looks upon Ernest as the authority on drinks. In 1952, Palmisano and several partners opened their first private club, the Key Club, located next door to the chef. Private clubs would be a theme throughout Palmisano's career. His next restaurant, Ernest's Stable Club at 624 Commerce Street, also operated as a private club for some time. In 1965, he and business partner Orlando Hawkins opened the club that would make Palmisano a bona fide celebrity, revitalize Shreveport's riverfront, and change the way that generations of Shreveporters ate crab claws. Ernest's Supper Club, located first at 516 and later at 624 Commerce Street, was a private supper club for members and invited guests. Valet parking was provided, waiters wore formal attire, and autographed portraits of celebrities who visited the club lined the walls of the foyer, as they do at Ernest Orleans today. So Ernest was the big deal back then. He was the go-to guy for food and drinks and partying. But, it's very interesting and cool how 70 years ago, black people couldn't even patronize these places on Commerce Street. And then today, going into 2025, you got 50 Cent and Jadakiss and Keith Sweat, all these black men buying up these properties on the same block, which they wouldn't be allowed to be 70 years ago. I think it's pretty cool. So I just hope that all these businesses are a success, and outsiders, local Shreveport people don't try to tear something up that's trying to better the city. You know what I'm saying? And when I got word that 50 was teaming up with Jadakiss and Keith Sweat, I'm not sure where Keith Sweat's from. Is Keith Sweat from New York? Where's Keith Sweat from? I'm not sure. I got to look that up. And y'all know, anybody who's a fan of hip hop music, hip hop culture, y'all know there's always been like a thing where we're separated by regions when it comes to hip hop, and there's always been like some kind of beef between the regions, East Coast, West Coast, down south, and I'm hoping that no new beef would start up because of what 50 and Jadakiss is doing, buying these two New York rappers buying property here in the Deep South. I mean, well, we have rappers, we have celebrities down here who are from the South that could have bought this property a long time ago. How come Master P didn't buy any property? Or Lil Wayne? So it took 50 to come down here all the way from New York to put his money into Shreveport, which other people could have did a long time ago.
Hey, boy, sing a little song for me. Come on, boy. Oh, the sun shines bright on my old Kentucky. Oh.
Daddy.